Hello Year 2, how are you? And welcome to today's history lesson. Now last week we started to learn about Mary Seacole, didn't we? And we looked at lots of different sources and tried to work out some information about her using the sources. So we acted like historians, didn't we? Now today we are going to be carrying on learning about Mary Seacole and answering the question, how important was Mary's work in the Crimea and how do we know? So again, we are going to be looking at some sources and looking at what they tell us about Mary Seacole, so that by the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to tell me even more about Mary Seacole and what made her famous. Now, before we move on to today's lesson, I would like to see what you can remember from last week's lesson. So for our starter activity for today, I would like you to create a mind map for everything you know about Mary Seacole so far. So I'll show you the first one that I did to give you an idea, and then you can carry it on. So the first thing I remember about Mary Seacole was that she set up the British Hotel to look after wounded soldiers. Okay, so could you pause the video now and complete the mind map? How many different things can you remember about Mary Seacole from last lesson? Okay, Year 2, so let's have a look together. So I've completed my mind map as well. Maybe you've got some of the same information as I have. So I also remember that she was voted the greatest Black Briton in the newspaper. Do you remember? Now, what else? Well, there is a statue of her in London, isn't there, next to the River Thames? As well as this, I remember that she went to a place where there was a war and helped the soldiers. She also was awarded 4 medals, and we saw those in the picture, didn't we? She was wearing them. Now, what else? Well, Mary Seacole made medicines to help treat the soldiers. She made healthy food to help the soldiers to get better. And the War Office didn't want her help. Remember, she wanted to help during the Crimean War, but the War Office said no, so she had to pay for herself, didn't she? So there we go. There is some of the information that we learned last week about Mary Seacole. So maybe you've got some things that are the same as me, or maybe you've added some things that are different, as long as you've created a mind map about Mary Seacole. So now let's move on to today's learning. So Mary Seacole, unfortunately, was a more or less forgotten person for about 200 years. Okay, so a lot of her work was forgotten. So how do we know that things that are said about Mary Seacole's life are true? So we are going to be looking at a mixture of some primary and secondary sources. Remember, primary source is a source made at the time of the event. So in this case, when Mary Seacole was alive. And secondary sources are after the event. So in this case, after Mary Seacole's life. Okay, so we're going to be looking at a mixture of primary and secondary sources. Now, lots of things have been said about Mary Seacole, but not all of them are true. So in order to work out if they are true, as I said, we have to find evidence to back it up, to prove that they are true. So we are going to be acting as history detectives today, some historians, to work out if the different things that have been said about Mary Seacole are true. And we're going to be looking at some sources to work out if they are true or not. So the first source that we have here is of her statue in London next to the River Thames. Now, we've got lots of statements on the other side about Mary Seacole. We've got that Mary visited men on the battlefield. Mary was given medals for her work. Mary set up a hotel selling food. Mary wrote a book about her life. Mary was kind. Mary wore bright clothes and a big hat. Mary was popular with the soldiers. Mary was born in Jamaica in 1805. People today want to remember Mary. Mary helped people in the West Indies as well as in Crimea. Okay, so we need to have a look at the source here of her statue in London and try and work out which statement it is telling us here. So is it telling us that Mary visited men on the battlefield? Well, if we look at the statue, it does say that she nursed in the Crimean War. Okay, but that doesn't tell us specifically that she nursed on the battlefield, did it? It just tells us that she was during the Crimean War. Okay, so that one is not a statement which we're shown in this source, are we? Okay, what about Mary was given medals for her work? Well, Mary isn't wearing any medals on the statue, is she? So we can't say that that's true from this source. We can't tell that that is true. Then we have Mary set up a hotel selling food. Well, again, that doesn't say anything about that on the statue, does it? Doesn't mean it's not true, but it's just this source is not telling us that it is true. Then we've got Mary wrote a book about her life. Now, does it tell us anywhere on the statue that Mary wrote a book about her life? Well, no, it tells us that her name is Mary Seacole and that she nursed the Crimean War. She was a nurse of the Crimean War and that she was alive from 1805 to 1881. So no, it doesn't tell us anything about her writing a book about her life. Now, we do know that Mary Seacole was kind because she nursed the wounded soldiers. However, it doesn't tell us that she is kind on the statue, does it? So therefore, we can't say that this source tells us that. What about Mary wore bright clothes and a big hat? Well, no, Mary Seacole in the statue is not wearing bright clothes and a big hat, is she? So we can't say that one. Mary was popular with the soldiers. Well, again, this source does not tell us that, does it? Mary was born in Jamaica in 1805. Well, it does tell us that she was born in 1805, but it doesn't tell us that she was born in Jamaica. So no, not that one. What about people want to remember Mary? People today want to remember Mary. Well, the statue is there today for people to remember Mary Seacole and what she did, isn't it? So therefore, yes, this source does tell us that people want to remember Mary. So therefore, yes, it does tell us this. And we can put number 1 in the next box because we have been told that people today want to remember Mary by using source 1. Okay, so source 1 has told us that people today want to remember Mary. Now, what about Mary helped people in the West Indies as well as Crimea? Well, we know that she was during the Crimean War, but it doesn't tell us anything about the West Indies, does it? So therefore, no. We have just got the one statement that this source tells us about, which is that people today want to remember Mary. Okay, so let's have a look at another source. So we've got source 2 here. In this source, we can see that it says bound for the battlefield, and there are some wounded soldiers, and we can also see Mary Seacole. So let's have a look at the statements and see which ones are true based on the source. So what can we see in the source? What does the source tell us is true from these statement options? Okay, so Mary visited men on the battlefield. Well, yes, look, it says bound for the battlefield. And look, Mary Seacole is helping two wounded soldiers on the battlefield. So therefore, yes, that one is true from this source, isn't it? This source tells us that Mary visited men on the battlefield. So therefore, we can write number 2 in the source box. Now, if there are other sources, because there might just not be one source that tells us this information. So if more than one source tells us that Mary visited men on the battlefield, you can also put it in the other sources column as well. Now, Mary was given medals for her work. Well, on the picture here in the source, I cannot see any medals on Mary Seacole. Can you? No, so therefore this source doesn't tell us that Mary was given medals for her work. It also doesn't tell us that Mary set up a hotel selling food, because she's not selling food in this source, is she? She's helping the wounded soldiers on the battlefield. It also doesn't tell us that Mary wrote a book about her life, because we can't see a book in the picture, can we? Now, does it tell us that Mary was kind? Well, we can see here that Mary was kind, can't we? Because she's helping the soldiers. So therefore, yes, we could say that this source tells us that Mary was kind because she's helping the wounded soldiers. So I'm going to put number 2 in that box as well, because source 2 tells us that Mary was kind, because we can infer that she's kind because she's helping the soldiers. Now, next one. Mary wore bright clothes and a big hat. Now, she is wearing bright clothes in here on this picture, but she is not wearing a big hat, is she? She's wearing a bonnet. Okay, she's wearing a shawl sort of thing, which isn't a big hat. Okay, what about Mary was popular with the soldiers? Well, she's helping them, so she is probably quite popular with them, but it doesn't tell us in the source that she's popular. It also doesn't tell us that she was born in Jamaica in 1805. It doesn't tell us that people today want to remember Mary. Mary helped people in the West Indies as well as in the Crimea. Well, we know that it's a battlefield here, and we know that she helped during the Crimean War, but it doesn't tell us here that she was helping in the Crimean War, does it? It just tells us that she's on the battlefield. So therefore, no, we can't say that this source tells us that this statement here, Mary helped people in the West Indies as well as Crimea, is true. Okay, so now we are going to look at the next source, source 3. Now, what I would like you to do is pause the video and see if you can work out what this source is telling us. Which statement is true based on this source, okay? Or there might be more than one statement that is true. So pause the video now and see if you can work out which statements are true from this source.